And so let's move on a little bit and talk a little bit about gold. Central banks are hoarding. We've been talking about that for the last 5 years. That's well documented. One of the things that is new and different are the massive deliveries coming into COMEX every single month. Again, here in December, huge billions of dollars worth in the first 3 days of the December contract, which went off the board on the 28th, the day after Thanksgiving. And that whole Thanksgiving CME server getting overheated. That's a whole nother discussion as well, talking about gold. But anyways, these are the most well capitalized, best informed players on the planet, those that are bringing all this metal into COMEX. At the same time, you've got Michael Hartnett, the lead analyst for Bank of America, who has a very, very, very expensive newsletter that goes to the institutional traders, saying that 25% of your assets should be in gold right now. You have this chief investment officer of Morgan Stanley who said sell half of your bonds, put 20% of your money in gold because it's the 60-40 platform that Wall Street has used forever. Sell half your bonds, 60-20-20, he says, 20% in gold. And maybe the craziest of all is Jeffrey Gundlach, the bond king, who is saying 25% gold is not overweight. So you got all of these people talking about gold. You got big money bringing money into the COMEX market, and the central banks have been hoarding it for a long time. Meanwhile, the public is all in on equities. My question to you is, with that backdrop, do you think gold is quietly being revalued behind the scenes while everyone is still asleep and herded in the wrong direction?
Well, I think there's certainly smart money out there. And I think a lot of people haven't caught on. I think the average man on the street has not caught on to what's going on. They're looking at their 401k 4 times a year and they're happy and they're not even thinking about things. They're not even looking at the world around them, more or less, what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the globe in terms of foreign policy, the arrogant American foreign policy that we're seeing all the way back to Iraq, but in Venezuela and elsewhere. That's a very aggressive type of foreign policy. So I agree with your points on that, and it's not fantasy that we invaded Iraq about the same time Saddam Hussein was talking against the dollar and wanting to make trades outside of the dollar nexus. So we know that that's really, really important to the U.S. government, obviously. But, I think the smart money is moving into gold. I think, I think they're getting ready. They're looking at not at 401ks, but they're looking at vast holdings of stocks. They're looking at the vast run-up in stocks, in AI stocks and technology stocks. They're looking at a 16-year run bull market in stocks, and they're starting to see the cracks in the system that I see in terms of the stock market, the risks and the threats that it faces. The way I see it is I can't tell you what swan is black, but it certainly seems like there's a lot of swans out there right now. And so, they're prepared. They're already pre-prepared into gold, whether it's the central banks or the big financial houses. They're already moving in that direction. And I think it's, the smart, long-time silver stackers, the accumulators and that sort of thing that are prepared. But I think the vast majority of Americans are not prepared for a downturn in the stock market. And what I anticipate happening is that when the stock market turns down and starts showing negative returns, the bull market ends, I think there's going to be, people are going to look around and they're going to say, hey, the returns on gold have been great. The returns on silver have been fantastic. The cost of production for gold and silver miners is far less than their output is. And so I think there's going to be a lot more money coming in that direction, into all of those markets. And when we approached $50 on silver, when we approached that historic price high in the silver market of $50, I was talking about how we're going to experience growing pains. And the growing pains essentially are more of the smart money, more of the traders, more of the machines coming into the market for precious metals and becoming active there where they hadn't really played any role whatsoever. And those growing pains, I mean, it's not like a teenager with sore muscles. I think we're in for some really, well, we've already experienced a lot of volatility. We've experienced backwardation. The crazy things that have been going on in the COMEX and the LBMA. With silver flying around the world and cooling units mysteriously shutting down. I mean, I didn't envision all of this chaos, but I certainly thought, there would be more chaos, at least in terms of price volatility. And I think longer term, I think we're going to see an entirely different wholesale marketplace. And we're going to be moving from one that was very tightly controlled by a very small number of players. And I think that as the silver market in particular, which is very small, I think that as more and more interest and more players go into that market, I think we're going to see some revolutionary changes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Speaking of silver, U.S.
The gold and precious metals market is entering a new era as global investors seek stability amid currency volatility and geopolitical tensions. Rising industrial demand, especially in technology and green energy, is reshaping long-term value trend for metals like silver and platinum. With central banks increasing their gold reserves, safe haven assets are becoming more influential in global trade. This shift signals a future where precious metals play a stronger role in financial security and economic strategy.
now calls it a critical mineral. They just reclassified it. The EU did it in 2023, and now China, in retaliation, is curbing exports. What's your take geopolitically, strategically, financially? What do you think about silver being classified critical? The U.S. government maybe just put a floor under it, policy floor, strategic, national security floor. What's your take?
Well, I've always considered silver a critical, important metal as well as a precious metal, and I've been chastising the environmentalists for their policies, which have diverted a large amount of silver into solar panels and electric cars and windmills and all of this stuff, because that silver that's being taken out of the marketplace, it's going to be very difficult to reobtain it and recycle it. And so, this is silver that may be lost on humanity forever. And I think that silver should be more highly valued because of its physical properties, the amazing things physically that it can do and does do for us in terms of electronics and computing technology, battery technology, and all the rest. I think that we're going to learn more and more over time about the importance of silver, and it doesn't exist in unexhaustible quantities. I'm usually the last person to be worried about exhausting a natural resource. But in silver's case, when I see electronic components being tossed into landfills, that somehow irks me much more than anything else. And so I'm definitely worried about it. And, labeling it a strategic metal, I think that's fine. We used to have stockpiles of silver in the United States, very large stockpiles. It used to be money, and we used to, have large stockpiles of it. But I distrust the government, in terms of what they want to use the silver for, because I think it has a lot of great uses for humanity, and I really dislike the idea that it could be used for weapons or military purposes, although acknowledging the fact that it is and it can be I'm sure it's being used in drones, and drones is the the military of the future. But in general, I think we all have to acknowledge that it's a strategic metal, it's a precious metal, and moving forward in human economic development and our standard of living, that silver is going to be of the utmost importance forever.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's also depleting in nature. Was 16-1 silver to gold ratio forever. Now it's 7-1. It's becoming harder to find. Let's shift.
Silver's strategic importance is surging as global industries push toward electrification and renewable energy. Its unmatched conductivity makes it essential for solar panels, EV batteries, and advanced electronics. With supply tightening and industrial demand rising, silver is transforming from a traditional precious metal into a core strategic resource. This shift positions silver as a critical driver in the world's technological and energy transition.